Rome, the year 67 AD, a city basking in its glory. A sprawling metropolis humming with trade, culture, and military might. At its heart sits the Palatine Hill, home to the Emperor Nero and his infamous Golden House, a labyrinth of luxury and excess. But beneath the gilded facade, a dark drama is unfolding, a tragedy of obsession, manipulation, and despair. Our story begins with Nero, not as the monster history remembers, but as a young, vibrant ruler, the 25-year-old successor to the great Augustus, the embodiment of Roman power and potential. He turned to the past, summoning the ghosts of his beloved wife in the form of a young slave named Sporus. But soon Nero's fascination turned possessive, morphing into a chilling plan. The emperor, driven by his unyielding grief and insatiable longing, decided to mold Sporus into a living replica of his beloved Poppaea, a chilling inversion of the biblical tale of Lazarus raised from the dead. But Nero's Lazarus would not rise as a man, but as a woman. The wedding was a spectacle, a public display of devotion, obsession, and control. Sporus, resplendent in white robes and a golden crown, rode in on a golden chariot like a triumphant general, his face hidden behind a veil until the moment he entered the temple of Mars, the god of war. Then, with a flourish, Nero lifted the veil, revealing not the face of Poppaea, but the shell of a young boy who had once been born a male. Sporus had caught Nero's attention not because of his strength or wit, but because of his startling resemblance to his deceased wife. He was the Empress Poppaea, at least in the twisted logic of Nero. For a brief, shameful period, Sporus found himself the object of a tug-of-war between two emperors, Galba and Otho, each vying for the upper hand. Finally, when Otho secured the throne, Sporus's fate was sealed. He was sentenced to the gladiator games, destined to be humiliated in the arena, forced to fight or entertain as the crowds roared their approval. He was paraded through the streets of Rome, not as an empress, but as a trophy, a prize to be won or discarded at the whim of ambitious rulers. Sporus's story is a beacon in that darkness, reminding us that behind the myths and legends, there were real people with hopes, dreams, and the will to define their own existence. His is a story not just of ancient Rome, but of resilience, resistance, and the timeless struggle for agency. Their union was celebrated with a feast, with music and dance, with the blessings of the gods, and the enthusiastic cheers of the populace. With each passing day, Nero's grip on power and reason weakened. In the depths of his despair, he reached for a small vial hidden in his tunic, a vial filled with a bitter draught, a silent goodbye to a life devoid of freedom and dignity. And finally, a martyr to the excesses of an empire and the cruelty of its obsession. His story is a haunting reminder of the corrosive impact of unchecked power, the tragedy of love lost and the indomitable spirit of those who resist erasure. He drank the poison, offering not a sound or a tear, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon, perhaps imagining a world where he was free from the shackles of his past. He was now the property of the deceased emperor, his value tied to the last shreds of Nero's authority. With Nero gone, Sporus was cast adrift, a castaway in a sea of uncertainty. Rebellions flared across the empire, and the Praetorian Guard, Rome's elite military force, grew increasingly amidst the growing turmoil. Sporus found little respite. He was still forced to perform the role of Poppaea, to smile and greet guests, to endure the emperor's endless demands for her presence. Sporus, the boy who had loved nothing more than to watch chariot races and gladiatorial combats, was now the most prominent figure in Rome. This striking likeness became a point of obsession for the emperor, who saw in Sporus a chance to resurrect the memory of Sporus, the living doll, was trapped in a gilded cage, forced to play the role of a woman, a role he never chose, and could never truly inhabit. Nero, the once promising young emperor, had become a prisoner of his own grief, his sanity fractured by his obsession. She wanted to be the ultimate arbiter of Roman taste and fashion, a role usually reserved for women of leisure. Poppaea, pregnant with what was to be the first child of Nero, died in a heated bath, possibly due to her own carelessness or, as rumors suggested, the chilling touch of her husband's jealousy. He was stripped of his identity, renamed Poppaea, and subjected to grueling workouts in the gymnasium, forcing him to adopt a feminine gait and mannerisms. His tutors drilled him relentlessly, shaping him into a vessel that would soon bear the weight of a resurrected Poppaea. Every movement, every gesture, every word was a step towards becoming the ghost of the empress. The death sent shockwaves through the empire. Nero was inconsolable, consumed by grief, paralyzed by guilt and suspicion. Sporus's body was reshaped to resemble his empress, his genitals mutilated, his nipples pierced. He was adorned with makeup and perfume, swathed in silk and gold, and forced to wear the jewels and ornaments that had once graced Poppaea's person. The boy who had once run freely through the palace halls was now a puppet, a living doll in an elaborate and macabre game orchestrated by a grieving, deranged emperor. Some whispered that he had ordered Poppaea's death, a victim of his own fear and possessiveness. Others claimed it was an accident, a tragic twist of fate. But whatever the truth, The weight of Poppaea's loss hung heavy on Nero, casting a long shadow over his soul and his reign. She reveled in the luxuries that came with her station, her baths scented with exotic perfumes, her wardrobe filled with fine silks and jewelry. She hosted lavish parties and immersed herself in the arts, all the while keeping a keen eye on the levers of power. She was a patron to many, including the philosopher Seneca, whom she encouraged to write about her virtues. It was clear that Poppaea desired to be remembered, not just as an empress, but as a cultural icon. Once hailed as a new Augustus, Nero had charmed Rome with his handsome features, his cultured demeanor and promises of reform. He had married Poppaea Sabina, a woman as captivating as she was ambitious, and together they seemed poised to usher in a golden age for Rome. They were the power couple, the envy of the empire, their love affair, the stuff of legend. But this gilded world was about to shatter, plunging Rome and its young emperor into a maelstrom of madness and mayhem. Poppaea, a former empress, bore the weight of tradition and status with grace, but she yearned for more. Tragedy struck during one of these indulgent moments. In the face of such profound grief, most would have turned to family, friends, or faith for solace. Not Nero at first. Nero had Sporus brought before him merely to gaze upon the boy's face, a morbid form of therapy to ease his aching heart. Sporus became the subject of a cruel experiment, a horrifying process of physical and psychological transformation, designed to turn a young boy into the image of a dead empress. But the transformation went beyond comportment. It delved into the realm of the grotesque. As the transformation neared its horrifying climax, Nero prepared for the final act, the ultimate perversion of love and power, the marriage of his empress and himself. In that instant, the charade was complete. Sporus was no longer a slave, or a boy, or a likeness. Yet behind the facade of imperial opulence, a profound emptiness had settled. As Nero's reign spiraled into chaos, Sporus became a pawn in a deadly game. When Nero finally met his end, ignominiously taking his own life amidst the ruins of his empire, Sporus's fate hung precariously in the balance. He was claimed by the newly enthroned Emperor Galba who, perhaps sensing the moral implications of owning Nero's former consort, decided to use Sporus as a pawn in his own political games. Throughout this ordeal, Sporus displayed a stoic silence, a testament to his enduring spirit and the trauma he had endured. But Sporus had endured enough, and so ended the tragic tale of Sporus, the boy who was once a slave, then an empress, then a trophy, in the annals of history, where emperors and empresses are often deified. It's easy to overlook the silent tragedies that played out in the shadows of their grandeur.